I'd like to call this public hearing to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Smurl? Here. Mr. Schuster?
Present.
Dr. Rothchild? Here. Mr. McAndrew? Present. Mr. King?
Here. Purpose of this public hearing is to hear testimony and to discuss the following. Resolution number 226-2023, approving the intermunicipal transfer of a restaurant liquor license, R-10600, currently owned by O'Grady LLC and located at 113 Van Brunt Street in Moscow, Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, 18444, to Scranton Premier Mart LLC, excuse me, located at 210 Pittston Avenue, Building 1, Scranton, Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, 18505, as required by the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board. We have a sign-in sheet here, and there's no names on that sign-in sheet. I don't know if there was anyone that would like to speak on this matter. Hearing none, if there's no further business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
This public hearing is adjourned. Thank you. So tonight, I believe we have our Scranton Fire Chief judges here tonight, and I believe council had a few questions concerning the purchase of a new rescue. Is it a what's that?
Ladder truck.
Oh, it's a new ladder truck. Excuse me. So we've asked the chief to come in today, and some council members have a few questions to ask concerning the process, and really just to kind of inquire. I believe it's close to $1 million purchase, right?
No, I'm good, thank you.
So I'll thank Chief Judge for being here this evening, and I'll turn it over to any board members that may have any questions for Chief Judge concerning this.
Hey, Chief, thank you very much for coming. I just want to go on the record, and this is nothing personal against you, but the reason why I called and asked for this caucus was because of the purchase of, it's a $1.4 million per apparatus purchase, but I also wanted to have the apparatus acquisition committee be here too, because they're supposedly involved in that process. They have to drive that truck. It has to be a truck they have confidence and faith in, but the mayor had no appetite for that and letting them come to council, which is discerning to me. And I also thought, well then, okay, as chairman of Public Safety Committee, I was going to have a committee meeting next week to bring them in separately if administration didn't want both of you guys at the table together, but I was told by the solicitor that I'm not allowed to. So this concerns me too. Like I said, this is nothing personal, but I want to, this is a $1.4 million piece of equipment. We have questions. I'm a process and procedural guy. I like to have everybody involved, make sure everybody's comfortable with the purchase, and that the residents are informed. And with that, the first couple questions I have is, was the committee involved?
Yes, once the decision was made on the direction of what we were going to replace and how we were going to replace it, the committee was formed. I could take you through the timeline if you'd like me to take you through the timeline.
Well, basically, I just want to know if they were at a seat at the table and were involved.
Once we officially convened the committee, once we made the decision which direction we were going to go with the replacement of that truck, because it's not just as simple as replacing a ladder truck. There's many different types. There's rear mounts, there's mid mounts, there's articulating ladder trucks, and what we were looking at is what was going to best serve the current needs of the city and any potential future needs of the city. The problem with the new ladder trucks is their overall height. Most of the manufacturers are well over 11'6". That doesn't allow us to go under certain bridges in the city. Luzerne Street, Olive Street, Ash Street. So what we did is we looked at it. The committee, not the committee wasn't formed yet, but the captains who are in charge of that truck over there on the 3 different shifts had talked to the shifts, put their concerns together, and sent them to us. At a chief's meeting on January 6th, we went over those concerns. Before we provided the direction on which way we wanted to go with this ladder truck, if it was going to be a rear mount or a mid mount or an articulating truck, We wanted to make sure we had all our facts and figures together. It was apparent in that meeting with the 3 assistant chiefs and also counsel from the master mechanic and the deputy chief. We took their concerns into consideration, what they were talking about, and believed them to be more so training concerns than logistical concerns. The current truck that's over there is a 1993 E1 that was redone in 2018. We sent it to Ocala, California, and spent about $300,000 on the refurbishment. I was the administrative captain at the time and sent a memo to the deputy chief, who then forwarded it to then business administrator Bolzoni, and the cost of a new ladder truck would have exceeded $850,000 at that time. So he agreed with the assessment. Let's send it down to get refurbished, see if we could get 7 to 10 years out of it, and that's essentially where we're going to be by the time we take delivery of this new apparatus. We'll be at that mark. It had the updates done. It took a year. It was sent back. It was trailered back here, and we've moved from that direction. But this wasn't a sole decision on my part. This was, ultimately, it becomes my final decision on which direction we're going to go. It's not the committee's decision. I'm very familiar with the MOU for the Vehicle Acquisition Committee. It was in the 2015 settlement agreement. I actually wrote that language. I was the union president at the time. And in that language, it says the city shall have all final say and determinations regarding the ladder truck. So after having counsel with the master mechanic and those 4 chiefs, we made the decision, and then we immediately formed the committee, told them the direction we were going to go, and they began to start the works to develop the specifications for that specific ladder truck, and that is currently ongoing.
Okay, so was it put out to bid? I mean, I've seen that there's a contract, but it never came down through us.
Yeah, in
We've yet
the
to see
time
any.
I've been here, I don't ever remember sending it up because it's under Pennsylvania State CoStar's pricing. It doesn't require bidding.
Are you speaking to the threshold, or?
Excuse me?
You're not speaking to the threshold, you're just saying you use CoStar's bidding process, or?
No, CoStar's pricing. Pennsylvania CoStar's pricing.
All right, so was it put out to bid, more than one company?
No,
And the contract's been signed, right?
that's correct. And the reason the contract was signed in March, there were a number of reasons behind that. The manufacturers typically have 1 or 2 price increases a year because of the metals. They were going to have a 5% increase on March 15th and a 27 to 29-month delivery time frame to get that truck. The problem with that is it puts us past the December 31st, 2025 timeline. The federal government is changing the emission standards. All fire truck manufacturers and large trucks are reconfiguring their engines, their motors, to meet those emission standards. We were told by some manufacturers that the price increase alone for that motor is going to be $90,000. If we didn't sign by March 15th, we were looking at a 5% increase on $1.4 million, which is $70,000, and then an additional 90 because we wouldn't have got it delivered. Most manufacturers right now, there's about 5 or 7 primary manufacturers of fire apparatus in the country. There's some smaller ones. We get the majority of our trucks now from Suffin Corporation. It is a privately owned entity from Ohio, and they have a plant outside of Hamlin. My number one concern, and the number one concern of the master mechanic and those 4 chiefs, is downtime for our apparatus. Our rescue truck that we just purchased is a Suffin. The ladder truck that is downtown here at headquarters is a Suffin. The new engine 4 that's going to be delivered this summer is a Suffin. We've stayed with that manufacturer basically for the most part because of service after delivery, which is very critical to the operations of this department. So we continued that relationship with them. They are probably would have came in as the cheaper bid if we did put it out for bid, but all manufacturers are a little bit different, and their flavors are a little bit different, and that's why we have purchased under the Pennsylvania CoStar's pricing guidelines, and it meets the requirements of the city of Scranton as well, if it's CoStar's pricing.
So have those contracts never come down to council in the past then?
Not that I ever
Just the
remember,
fire vehicles
Councilman.
that you know of? Okay.
Councilwoman.
Well, they probably should. Just because they didn't doesn't mean they should. We would have these questions prior, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that there's some development from legal is looking at something along those lines to put in front of you at some point.
So is there a spec review, build spec meeting scheduled? Or, like you said, it's ongoing? Is that scheduled or no?
They've had a couple meetings already. We've sent the committee to Connecticut. The State Fire Academy in Connecticut has a similar truck that we'll be taking delivery of. They went out there for a day with the manufacturer, looked at that truck. They will be going to, they're going to have another meeting here in the next week or two, and then the committee will be traveling to Ohio on June 13th and 14th to finalize do the pre-construction meeting is what it's called. They get everything in line, even though we're not going to be able to take delivery of that vehicle until December of 2025.
So is the spec of this new apparatus the same as the equipment being replaced? Like the outrigger span, the operational use, the height, and the turning radius?
The height is
I heard
low.
that they might be concerns.
The height is lower, the turning radius is better. You're dealing with a 2025 truck with what they call max force steering technology compared to a 1994 truck. This one is different because it is a mid-mount, which means the ladder is mounted in the middle of the vehicle instead of the rear, which shortens the height. But the other thing from an operational standpoint is it will look exactly the same and operate exactly the same as the ladder truck that's downtown here at Fire Headquarters, with the exception this one will not have a bucket on the end of it. It will be what we consider a straight ladder truck, just a stick. But from an operational standpoint, it's going to be the same as far as training and setup.
So have there been issues or complaints with the one that's downtown?
No, other than they think it's too long, but the reason it's a little bit longer than most is they have to squat the height on that truck and lengthen it out because of the requirements that we can't raise the doors at that building, and it needs to be able to fit inside that building.
Okay, so was a similar piece of equipment brought to the city to see if it would work? The concerns I heard is, I'm not sure the actual name or the piece of it. Like, is the outrigger, is that like the stabilizers that go out?
It's the jack span, that's correct.
I'm sorry, what is it?
The jack span or spread.
Okay, so my concern, or the concerns I heard, is say the narrow streets on West Side. Can they can't, it can only go out one side, right, where it should go out two to stabilize the truck? There's not enough room on these streets, for this apparatus. Is that true, or?
No, it's not true. You could, what we call short jack the truck. So if we have a fire on the officer's side, you don't put the outriggers. It's a simple physics lesson. You don't have to put the outriggers down on that side. You put them out as far as you can so that you have the ability to swing over to that side, but that's a common practice where if we had to short jack it. There's benefits and to every different truck. And what we looked at is what was going to work best for the current needs in the city and the future needs in the city. And from a training standpoint, all the issues that were sent by the three captains that worked there, and they gathered that information from their members who worked there. The chiefs, all 5 of us at a chiefs meeting, addressed all those concerns and felt that this was the direction that we needed to go. And, you know, it's disappointing that those issues were brought here to council. Obviously, the union's aware that there's not a grievable issue because there's been no grievance on this. We've been extremely diligent. I've started this conversation since November. I personally took a trip out to Ohio to look at this type of truck with 2 of the captains and start the investigation on, all right, what direction are we going to go? Are we going to go with the rear mount? Are we going to, like we have now, and take a chance that, you know, a inexperienced driver tries to put it underneath one of our bridges, that it won't go under, and then we have essentially a paperweight, a $1.4 million paperweight, and I couldn't wrap my head around doing something along those lines. So that's why we decided to go with the mid-mount truck that's a lower center of gravity. It will work for the needs of the city. You know, I just want to say one thing. The tools that we buy and the equipment that we buy for our firefighters, that stuff is great. It's the investment we put in those members. I could give them a Swiss Army knife and a couple rubber bands, and they'll get the job done. So if it's a training issue that we're looking at, we will address that, and we will make sure that they're able to do their job. But I see no limitations in this truck that we have purchased. There'll always be some, but no matter which apparatus we would have went with, one wouldn't have been able to do something that the other one could. They have pluses and minuses on both sides.
Chief, what's the maximum height of this new ladder truck that?
It's under 10.2 or 10.4, I believe. So it fits underneath all of our bridges in the city.
All right, but the maximum height that the ladder will extend,
This is going to be a 100-foot ladder truck.
100 foot, will that be our tallest, or the one here is?
The one here is also a 100-foot. This one has a bucket on the end of it. The one that's currently over at Truck 4's building is a 75-foot aerial device. So this will give us more capabilities, especially in the downtown area. That's our only other ladder truck that's in service. So, and we've had high-rise fires. And only in the last couple of years, we've had a couple of them, and a couple of them have been fatals, and they've been on higher floors. Both of these trucks will now be able to reach those higher floors.
Do these, the existing trucks that we have, do they fit underneath the bridges?
All of our apparatus we spec to be able to fit under bridges. We don't want to take that chance to damage, taxpayers.
So every truck that we have will go under any bridge in the city?
Currently, yes.
Okay.
And that, the shortest bridge height we have is 11.6.
No, I think it's, I could find it here. Actually have it in my notes. Theodore Street is 11.8, Court Street's 13, Main Avenue's 12.10, Luzerne's 11.4, Olive and Penn is 12.4, Olive Street is 11.6 and a quarter, and Market Street is 12.3.
Okay, so right in that ballpark, 11.4.
Yeah.
All right, this truck here, so the difference with this truck compared to the current truck is where it's mounted. The current truck
That's
is a
correct.
rear ladder mount, where this one's a mid-ladder mount. Now, is the jack span different? It's a different size on the mid-mount compared to the rear? It needs to
Where
be
the-
larger because it's mounted in the middle?
It's where the jacks come out that's a little bit different. So where the jacks come out, and actually the jack footprint on the one that we just purchased is a little bit longer, but when you short jack it, it's essentially the same. It becomes a center of gravity in a physics lesson, and it's an acceptable practice, and it meets all the appropriate NFPA standards to be able to put that truck into operation.
What's the footprint when both are out?
On the Suffin SL 100, I think it's 14 foot.
That's both sides, right? So 7
Total.
7 foot each side.
I'll get you the exact number. I'm not exactly sure. I don't have it in, I thought, oh, you know what? I do have it, I think. It's wide enough on the majority of our streets that the truck can go down and they can sling the jacks out, at least to the operational side. I could find out that information
Yeah,
and get it
how
to you.
about, so do you know, this might be an easier question, if what's the difference in the current truck's jack span with
The
both?
current truck's jack span is very small.
Okay.
They're underslinged, what they call underslung jacks, but it's only got one set of jacks because it's a single axle vehicle and only a 75-foot aluminum ladder that gets put into operation.
All right, yeah, my next question was on ladder height. So this truck has a 100-foot ladder, so it's
Correct.
another 25 feet. It's a 25 feet difference from the current truck.
As far as length?
Ladder height.
Ladder height, yes, correct. 25 more.
Okay. All right, and it's good. It's common practice to only put out one jack arm on the operational side of the fire.
You can, yes. It's an acceptable practice. It's not that it's common practice, but when it's needed, especially in an urban setting, yes, that is a common practice.
Okay, so whenever you can, you would extend both if you're extending that ladder.
Correct.
Okay. This truck was in the capital budget?
Yes, we've had that in the capital budget. This, let's see, I will tell you, the memo that I sent to the business administrator for last summer, July of 2022. New ladder truck, the current truck 4 is a 1993, one that was refurbished in 2018 at a cost of approximately $300,000. Plan was to have refurbished, extend the life of the apparatus by 5 to 7 years. Currently, the ladder truck payment of $110,000 for truck 2 is slated to be paid off in 2026, which could be repurposed to make the 7-year lease payment for new truck 4. A committee was convened in early 2023 to begin the work on developing, a committee will be formed in early 2023 to begin the work on developing specifications and design requirements for the new vehicle. The plan is to place the order at the end of 2023 with an expected delivery in the second quarter of 2025. When we initially did this memo, the manufacturer's time for apparatus is currently anywhere from 14 to 18 months once the contract is signed, but obviously because their timelines have extended out significantly, and that's common with all the other manufacturers as well, it's 27 to 29 months for delivery. So we will take delivery of that by December 2025 so that we're not having to meet the emission standards for 2026. And the problem with meeting the new emission standards is we've seen in the past, the first iteration of those motors typically have significant problems. And, you know, that's kind of been a mantra in this department since I've been on. We never want to be the one trying the first generation of anything. We want to get them to get the bugs out.
In that 2018, the refurbishing, you were expecting to get 7 years, 2025 gets us that 7?
Correct. Close to it. The truck is getting tired. It's been having some minor issues that we've been working through. It's been passing its annual third-party ladder inspection and pump testing, but the motor is still a 1993 Detroit motor that leaks oil, and, you know, we want to make sure that we have something that's going to be reliable for the city.
Chief, what happens to a truck like that once we get the new truck?
Hopefully, we'll keep it as a reserve. That's the hope. If not, what we've done in the past is we have, by the time we typically in the past have gotten done with vehicles, they've been put out. We've attempted to sell them in the used market, but because they're municipal fire trucks, they don't typically bring much. Historically, I'll tell you what's happened is they've been sold for scrap. But that truck could be a reliable spare piece of apparatus for the city for when the other one goes down.
Where would you store that, Sorrento?
I don't know. That's becoming a concern. You know, honestly, the hope is that we build that training center up at CTC, and it's going to have some garage space, and we can use that as a training truck up there.
I have a question regarding, just going back to the formation of the acquisition committee. The process that you described in the timeline, is that typically what would occur for that committee, that you would first consult with some of the chiefs and others before, you know, deciding on an initial direction and then giving that to the committee to look further into? Or
Sometimes when we're just replacing an engine, you're not really changing much with the actual pumpers. So it's, hey, we're going to replace this pumper, we form the committee. But because this was going to require a change, getting a low-profile mid-mount ladder truck that would fit under those bridges, there's 2 manufacturers that we found. One is E1, they're in Ocala, Florida, is where they're headquartered, and their nearest service station is down in New Holland, Pennsylvania. And then the other one is KME, no, Ferrara. And I believe Ferrara Service Center is in New Jersey. Currently, when we have a problem with the ladder truck or one of the engines that's made by Suffin, we usually typically will have that repaired or addressed in the same day because the plant is literally in Hamlin, Pennsylvania. We're that close and that fortunate enough to be, you know, so near to a manufacturing facility that has a full service center as well.
Do you happen to know offhand what the new emission standards are? What are going to be the changes in those engines?
So from what I'm told, Cummins Motors are discontinuing their entire line of motors, and they're redoing and making 2 new motors. One, I believe, will be up to 450 horsepower, and the other one will go up, depending on how they configure it, up to 600 and some horsepower. The problem is, the emission standards are going to, they're going to make them have to adjust what we call the doghouse, the internal cab configuration of all these vehicles. So the manufacturers are going to have to reconfigure their cabs to be able to accept that larger motor, and there's going to be larger exhaust and emissions components that are going to make that engine larger. And that's, we had gotten information from one vendor that Cummins hasn't officially told them what the price increase is going to be, but one manufacturer is already quoting a $90,000 price increase. Not a $90,000 motor, a $90,000 price increase on a motor. And our ladder trucks have the bigger motors in them. Our engines typically have the smaller ones up to 450 horsepower, but because our rescue truck and our ladder trucks are bigger and heavier, they're going to have a bigger motor in them. So, you know, by signing that contract on March 15th, we probably saved the city close to $150,000.
So to keep the current horsepower that they have to make the engine larger to make up for those emissions, and it's just a new redesign.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I don't have any more questions for the apparatus, but I have a question about billing. Is everybody done with the apparatus? Or?
Yeah, I'd like to move to that.
So recently, it's been brought to my attention that a few people have been billed for an apparatus fire. So the only legislation that I've seen was in 2021, where a vehicle fire, you know, if it spilled liquids or whatever, it could be billed to the insurance company, and that makes sense, and I'm fine with that. But my concern is if residents are being billed for, you know, they already pay taxes to have fire safety. You guys do a fantastic job, but I don't know where, and I actually saw a copy of a bill for someone's garage, like it was part of their house. So if that, when did that change come about? Or if it,
That's been going on as long as I remember. Anytime rescue went out, they would bill $500 for rescue to go out. Now, I'll clarify a couple things. What we did in the 2021 ordinance agreement is we implemented the billing practice, our billing fee structure from PA Fire Recovery that other municipalities are using as well. Now, with that being said, when a taxpayer in this city gets a bill, on the top of that bill it says turnover to insurance company on the top of the bill. They're supposed to turn that into their homeowner's insurance. They will send that notice 3 times. After 3 times, the bill goes away. We don't send them the collections, we don't bill them. It goes to the insurance companies.
so for whatever, forever, how long, when someone incurs a house fire, they get a bill?
They get a bill, yeah, for
Everybody
our
in the city?
response. Yes.
Because I've never heard of it.
Yeah,
It's weird that it was brought to my attention recently. I actually saw a post on Facebook. Some guy's like, Jesus, look at him, I'm getting charged. So I never heard of that before.
Yeah.
And I think the public should be made more aware of that. But if the insurance doesn't cover it and you don't collect it, the company that's issuing the bill, who's the company that's...
PA Fire Recovery.
All right, so whatever they do collect, they get some and half goes back into equipment?
They get 15%, and the rest by ordinance goes in the account that has to be used for Special City Services account, 120 account, that has to be used for the purchase of fire department apparatus.
All right, well,
So if someone has a fire at their home, and I don't know, let's say that there was, I don't know, $30,000 worth of damage, and there's a $500 deductible on that, then the homeowner pays the $500 deductible, and then, I don't know.
no, their bill will be, the one bill I saw was like $4,000.
Some of them have been that high.
Or some 9. Which
Yes.
I don't understand. I mean, the billing's the billing. But I just never knew that, you know, a resident, after paying taxes for services, like I said,
They're not responsible for the bill, though, as residents.
but what
and
insurance company's going to pay it if they know that?
I could tell you that
That they're-
we've collected well over $100,000 this year
In 1 year?
in billing, yes. That goes right into account. Now, some of that is for automatic fire alarms. I believe about half is for automatic fire alarms, and the other half through April is for, goes for vehicle, or for emergency response. And it's paid, we get every time PA Fire Recovery gets a check, they send me an email, and it's usually from Nationwide or State Farm, and then they take their 15% fee. and then they send the check to us. And the contract, I believe, with PA Fire Recovery expired in 2018. And when we changed or added for PA Fire Recovery to bill for the false alarms in the city, false alarms are different from response, but PA Fire Recovery bills for false alarms by our ordinance. When we talked to when I talked to Attorney Esquire, I said, we found out that the contract was expired, and she said, how much do they make a year off of their take from the city? And it was below the bidding threshold. But I said, now putting PA Fire Recovery doing the the false alarm billing too, it might put it over. So we were going to track that this year. If it was going to get close to getting over, we were going to put it out for contract. But I know that last time they bid, they're the only company in Pennsylvania that's actually doing the billing. And I think that's important to note because the billing has to be done in accordance with the insurance regulations as well. So if you have a company in Ohio that doesn't understand any legislation tied to what we can recoup, it needs to be a company in Pennsylvania. So I actually got an email from them a couple weeks ago. They anticipate that they're actually going to go over the bidding threshold on their take this year with the two combined, that it's going to be about $1,000 over. So we'll probably be putting that out either for a sole source to actually execute a contract with them.
Now, how long have those bills been going out? They've been going out for 10 years? They've been going out?
The bills?
Yeah.
For false alarms, that just started
Yeah,
this
false
year.
alarms was 2022.
remember that
These
one.
bills that we're talking about here for,
Anytime rescue went out, they billed. I went back, I had emails back to 2019 and looked at something from 2018 that was at the Scranton Housing Authority. Obviously, that wouldn't be a accident at the Scranton Housing Authority, and there was a check from Scranton Housing Authority in 2018 or 19 for $500. So they were billed back then, at least then, and I believe it
so
was
at least
before that.
18. So that's as far as you know, is as back as
Yeah,
2018?
it goes back probably to the original ordinance, I don't know when the original, well, probably the second iteration of the ordinance. It probably goes back to at least then at any time. It was basically any time Rescue 1 went out on the road, there was a bill generated for $500, and it was paid by the insurance company. If it wasn't, they would send bills to the homeowner or the resident. What they do is if it's a non-resident in the city for a vehicle accident, they do go after them for that to recoup that money. But if they're a city resident with the city address or it was a no-fault accident, I've had a couple that I've had to address. They said, hey, my son was in an accident. It wasn't his fault. We'll get the police report. And we'll get it straightened out. And PA Fire Recovery immediately takes care of the bill.
Now, have they changed the way that they do billing? Have they changed the bills, anything like that, that this is different or it's, coming to light now?
Just the updated billing fee structure that we passed, that was it. But nothing that I'm aware of.
What do you mean that we passed?
The council passed, I apologize.
21?
Yeah.
All I saw was, when you say updated, you mean for vehicles?
The billing structure, if you look on there, charges for
No,
use
I know
of,
what it's being charged, but that same structure's for, that same billing is for a structure.
correct. Yeah.
So the billing's been updated, but it didn't reference structures, it just referenced
Yeah, I think
vehicles.
it was always been emergency response anytime it went out because that's how we've been billing as far as before I was chief. And they updated the because they wouldn't update the billing structure for SCBA. We don't use SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus, the masks for vehicle accidents.
Do you know how much of a difference there was in the billing structure at that point in time from the previous?
From the previous, I think the city was getting around $20,000 to $30,000 a year. I anticipate that the change has put us closer to 80 or 90, maybe 100,000, depending on our responses and their collection rate. Sometimes they don't collect. I'm able to look at their system. There's what they consider $1 million in non-receivables from when they started, but they don't send it to collections or go after the people. But they must track that on their own, but I'm able to see that on the network, their network.
I mean, the update with the update with the billing structure that occurred in 2021, was it much of a difference compared to the billing structure previous to that?
Yeah, I think we were getting about $30,000 a year previously, and I think we're getting close to $100,000 a year.
And the other past chiefs would have been involved in that as well? They would have known of the billing?
Oh, yeah, they wouldn't known the billing practices, sure.
So the fees tripled.
What's that?
So the fees pretty much tripled.
Yeah, the fees have tripled, and what we do is they're able to recoup our costs. If we have a fire and we lose hose, that gets put in there and gets turned into those people's insurance company. Hose, thermal imaging camera, if we have any damaged equipment, that's all written up by the officers in the narrative, and we have the ability to bill for that. Now, if we collect on it, we collect on it. If we don't collect on it, well then, it is what it is. But it all goes into that 120 Special City Services account.
Thanks for the clarity, but I don't think the common resident knows that they're going to be billed for a fire, a structural fire.
Yeah.
They don't know it. I didn't know it. Nobody I knew it. So we should probably get it out there, like educate and awareness for this.
Does anyone else have anything for the chief? If not, Chief, I want to thank you for coming in and clarifying some of these issues that concerns council had. I appreciate you being open and honest and just kind of clearing up some, questions that council had. And we appreciate, as always, all the great work that the Scranton Fire Department does to protect our city.
Thank
So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take a short break and we'll begin the meeting at 6:30.